Houston. We're standing by for the final call from Flight Director Gary Horlocker here. Gary Horlocker here in concert with his discussions with his counterpart in Dulles, Virginia, the Mission Director Ken Peake, that will resume Cygnus's approach to the station from its hold point at 250 meters. It will soon enter what is called the keep out. That is basically the imaginary box that puts it in close proximity to the International Space Station. This view is identical to the view that Tim Kopra and Tim Peake are seeing in the cupola at the workstation of the International Space Station as they monitor the approach box, if you will, the corridor in which Cygnus will be slowly edging its way through as it makes its way up the radial vector, or the R-bar, toward the capture point at about 30 meters away from the International Space Station. That's the point at which Tim Kopra will begin to extend the Canadarm 2 robotic arm into the grapple position toward a grapple fixture on Cygnus to latch on to that grapple fixture and to complete the rendezvous that Cygnus has been conducting since its launch 3 days ago from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Flight control team in Dulles currently sending commands to repressurize Cygnus's fuel tanks, this per the checklist that will enable it to be in the correct configuration for the small thruster firings, the very fine-tuned, precise thruster firings that will be conducted from this point until it reaches its capture point a short time from now. Again, capture scheduled at 5:40 a.m. Central Time, 6:40 a.m. Eastern Time. Once Cygnus departs the 250-meter hold point, it will slowly make its way through 100 meters away from the International Space Station to its next hold point, which will be just 30 meters away. It will remain at that point for about 10 minutes or so until flight controllers have an opportunity to run through a checklist of a final review of Cygnus's systems and the readiness of the crew on board the International Space Station to reach out with the Canadarm 2 robotic arm to grapple the grapple fixture on the Cygnus spacecraft. We should be getting views of that final operation, close-up views of Cygnus through the end effector camera on the Canadarm 2 robotic arm as Cygnus comes ever so close for its capture point. Flight controllers at Dulles taking a final poll for a go to depart the 250-meter point and press on to 30 meters.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus and ISS are configured for approach inside the keep-out sphere. Expect approach to resume shortly and stand by for PCS HCP command checkout.
Copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. Cygnus has now resumed its approach from the 250-meter hold point, now approaching the final hold point at 30 meters. All of Cygnus's systems in good shape. Cygnus, again, the first in a constellation of cargo ships arriving at the International Space Station over the next 3 weeks. Cygnus's arrival today, placing it at the nadir or Earth-facing port of the Unity module of the International Space Station. 1 week from today, an unpiloted Progress resupply ship will arrive to automatically dock to the aft port of the Zvezda service module. And 2 weeks from now, if all goes as planned, on April 10th, the SpaceX Dragon cargo ship carrying the Beam expandable module will arrive at the International Space Station and will be mated to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module, putting both Cygnus and Dragon side by side at adjacent berthing ports for the first time ever.
Houston Station on Space Ground 2 for Cygnus. Step 3 is complete and the hold command is armed.
Houston copies. Okay, station, the hold arm is confirmed. You are go for PCS HCP command checkout disarm for step 4 and 1.102.
Copy, step 4 in work. Houston Station on Space Ground 2 for Cygnus. Step 4 is complete and the hold command is disarmed.
Houston copies.
Cygnus now 210 meters away from the International Space Station.
Station PCS HCP command checkout was successful. Begin monitoring approach from 250 meters per step 5 in 1.102.
Station copies. Step 5 in work.
Station Cygnus is inside the 200-meter keep-out sphere. Crew now has authority to issue an abort if no comm with MCC Houston and the light is outside the corridor.
Station copies, and for block B corridor monitoring, we see the primary range at 190 meters. On the port 1 lower outboard camera, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle matches the outline. The light is offset half a width to starboard from the circle, and the circle is in the center of the corridor.
Houston copies.
For S1 lower outboard camera, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset 3 widths to port and half a length forward, and the circle is in the center of the corridor.
Those reports from European Space Agency astronaut Tim Peake in the cupola of the International Space Station, all reflecting a perfect alignment as Cygnus approaches in the so-called keep-out sphere. That's the imaginary cone that Cygnus travels up the radial vector from below the station to its capture point, at which time Expedition 47 Commander Tim Copra will begin maneuvering the Canadarm 2 robotic arm into position to grapple Cygnus and complete its 3-day rendezvous. Again, the view you're looking at is the same engineering overlay through the proximity communications equipment being utilized by the crew on board the station for situational awareness and alignment purposes, so that they know exactly where Cygnus is during the final phase of its approach.
Station on Space to Ground 2 for Cygnus Corridor Block B monitoring. On the port 1 lower outboard camera, we see the light within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is in the center of the circle, and the circle is offset 1 width to starboard.
Houston copies.
For starboard one lower outboard camera, we see the light within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset 2 widths port, and the circle is offset half a width starboard.
Houston copies. Good luck, Bravo.
Tim Peake providing continuing reports on the approach of Cygnus and its relative alignment to all of the engineering data that he and Station Commander Tim Copra are seeing inside the cupola of the International Space Station. Here in the Flight Control Room, visiting Vehicle Officer Jerry Ancharas has reported to Flight Director Gary Horlacher that the new refined capture time is more in the neighborhood of 5:47 a.m. Central, 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time. That's the latest estimate based on the rate of Cygnus's approach through these gate posts, if you will, the milestone posts, as it approaches a 30-meter hold point. We should be getting further updates by the time that Cygnus reaches the 30-meter mark. That's no issue whatsoever. There is a rather large window within which Cygnus can be captured based on appropriate and acceptable lighting conditions for the two robotic arm operators, Copra and Peake, who are working out of the cupola workstation in the International Space Station. The station and Cygnus flying just tens of meters apart from one another, currently flying over the North Pacific, about to reach British Columbia, at which point the station will begin a northwest to southeasterly track in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator.
The station on space ground 2 for Cygnus Block Bravo corridor monitoring. We see a primary range of 100 meters. On the port 1 lower outboard camera, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset half a width relative from the circle, and the circle is offset half a width from the corridor center.
copy.
For starboard one, lower outboard camera, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset 2 widths to port from the circle, and the circle is offset half a width to starboard from the corridor center.
Okay, Station Houston copies. And for the circle offset in the port camera, can you tell us which direction that was?
The port 1 lower outboard camera, the circle is offset half a width to starboard from the corridor center.
Good block, Bravo, Tim. Thanks.
Good reports continue to come in from Tim Peake, who is in the cupola, along with Commander Tim Kopra. The two of them, along with Yuri Malenchenko, about to begin their 103rd day in space since their launch aboard their Soyuz spacecraft from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan back on December 15th. Jeff Williams, who is looking over their shoulders, monitoring Cygnus systems, is now in his 8th day in space, having just begun his 8th day in space, along with his two crewmates, Alexei Ovchinin and Oleg Skripochka, who launched just over a week ago from the Baikonur Cosmodrome to begin their 6-month mission on the International Space Station. Once Cygnus is grappled, the crew aboard the International Space Station will hand over the chores of the robotics to the robotic officer here in Mission Control, who will spend some time slowly maneuvering Cygnus at the end of the arm over to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module in what is called the installation or the pre-install maneuver. They will check out all of Cygnus's systems and all of the systems on the common berthing mechanism at the capture point, the berthing port, if you will, on the Earth-facing side of Unity before Cygnus is guided in ever so slowly to an alignment with the common berthing mechanism for what is called first stage capture, and the second stage capture, where a series of 4 gangs of 4 bolts apiece, 16 bolts in all, will latch Cygnus to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module. It will remain there under current planning until May 20th, when it will be unbolted and uninstalled from that Unity module port, and then cast into orbit, back into orbit, to begin to back away to a safe position from the International Space Station for its eventual deorbit and entry back into the Earth's atmosphere, where it will ultimately burn up harmlessly over the Pacific Ocean. Cygnus now 72 meters away from the International Space Station, continuing to close ever so slowly on a true course for its ultimate grapple. The updated grapple time is expected to be in the neighborhood of 5:47 a.m. Central Time, 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time, under the current projection by the visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control. the International Space Station in Cygnus, just about 65 meters away from it, currently passing over eastern South Dakota. On this pass over the United States, we'll be moving into an orbital sunrise a short time from now. We're out of range just momentarily from our tracking and data relay satellite system, handing over satellites. We'll be regaining our downlink television capability from the International Space Station just a few moments from now. Everything continuing to go very smoothly with Cygnus's final approach for its grapple and eventually later this morning its installation to the Earth-facing port of the Unity module. Again, notable in the sense that this will be the first of 3 consecutive weeks, frankly 3 consecutive weekends, of cargo ship arrivals at the International Space Station. 1 week from today, the scheduled automated docking of the Russian unpiloted ISS Progress 63 cargo ship to the aft port of the Zvezda service module. That Progress scheduled to be launched on Thursday from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. And then 2 weeks from now, the SpaceX Dragon cargo ship scheduled to arrive at the station on Sunday, April 10th, with its current launch date targeted for April 8th from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we've regained our downlink television capability from the station. We have in view in this engineering overlay the same view that Tim Kopra and Tim Peake are seeing from the cupola workstation. A good view of Cygnus and a good view of its jets firing as it fine-tunes its approach to the 30-meter hold point, which is coming up just a few moments from now.
The size matches the outline. The light is in the center of the circle, and the circle is in the center of the corridor center.
Houston copies.
For starboard 1 lower outboard camera, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset 1 width to port relative from the circle, and the circle is in the center of the corridor.
Okay, those are excellent words, Tim. Thanks. Houston copies.
the station on space to ground 2. For Cygnus, we see a primary range of 40 meters and no change to corridor monitoring block Bravo.
Copy, 40 meters. Houston copies.
This is Mission Control Houston. Cygnus approaching the 30-meter hold point. A great view from the International Space Station as the two craft are about to enter an orbital sunrise, currently flying just to the north of the Dominican Republic. At the orbital flight control room in Dulles, Virginia, the Dulles flight controllers are continuing to monitor all of the Cygnus' systems as it has now arrived at the 30-meter hold point. This could be a very brief hold with all of the Cygnus' systems reported to be in excellent shape. We'll be standing by for a final determination and a go for final approach.
We see the vehicle in the hold mode at primary range of 31 meters and block 6 in work.
Good copy.
Flight Director Gary Horlocker is taking a final poll here in the flight control room for a final approach. This is Mission Control Houston. We're standing by now for a final go from the flight control team here in Houston for Cygnus to resume its final approach inside 30 meters for its grapple by Expedition 47 Commander Tim Kopra, backed up in the cupola at the workstation there by European Space Agency astronaut Tim Peake. The International Space Station currently flying 251 statute miles over the Barbados, moving from northwest to southeast. This orbit will carry the two spacecraft directly over the European Space Agency's Ariane 5 launch site in French Guiana. The only thing we're waiting on at the moment is a final step or two of configuration by Kopra and Peake of the systems on the Canadarm 2 robotic arm. Otherwise, everything else is in great shape as we stand by for the resumption of final approach by Cygnus for its grapple and ultimate installation on the Earth-facing port of the Unity module of the International Space Station a bit later this morning. Once again, we're standing by for the crew to complete a brief review of its robotic procedures on board in the cupola workstation before they radio down that they're go for final approach. All of the other flight control positions, both here and at the orbital ATK flight control room in Dulles, Virginia, are go for final approach. So we're simply standing by for the crew, and then Cygnus will resume its approach to close the final gap of 30 meters for its eventual grapple by the station's Canadarm 2 robotic arm being operated by Expedition 47 Commander Tim Kopra. And an excellent high-definition view of the Cygnus cargo craft with its ultra-flex solar arrays deployed as they were just over 2 hours after its launch on Tuesday night from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Cygnus has been rock solid on its approach Over the last 72 hours, all of its rendezvous burns to place it in close proximity to the International Space Station have gone off without a hitch.
Station on space to ground 2 for Cygnus. The crew is complete with block 6 and step 3 of procedure 1.110, and the crew is ready for Cygnus approach to the capture point.
Houston, copy. Stand by. Station Cygnus is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Station copies.
And Mission Director Ken Peake at the Orbital ATK Flight Control Room in Dulles, Virginia, has reported to Flight Director Gary Horlocker that Cygnus has now resumed its final approach to capture point.
The crew is primed to issue retreat if pry range less than 6 meters.
Station copies.
It should take about 9 minutes for Cygnus to reach that capture point. And at that point, Expedition 47 Commander Tim Copra will begin the maneuvering of the Canadarm 2 robotic arm ever so slowly to reach out and grab onto the grapple fixture on Cygnus to complete its 3-day rendezvous.
Station on primary range of 25 meters. For Block Bravo, the port 1 lower outboard camera, the lights within the corridor, the vehicle size matches the outline. The light is in the center of the circle, and the circle is in the center of the corridor.
Houston, copies.
The starboard 1 lower outboard camera, the lights in the corridor, the vehicle size matches the outline. The light is in the center of the circle, and the circle is offset quarter of a width to starboard from the corridor center.
Houston, copies. Good luck, Bravo, Tim.
Those calls from European Space Agency astronaut Tim Peake back to Spacecraft communicator Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency here in Mission Control at Houston, indicating a rock-solid and on-target approach by Cygnus at this point, just 23.5 meters away. Here in the flight control room, the visiting vehicle officer is estimating that we should be at the capture point about 5 minutes from now.
Houston Station on Space Ground 2 for Cygnus, Block Bravo corridor monitoring with your prime.
Copy, no change at 20 meters.
With Cygnus on a true course on its final approach for grapple and berthing, the orbital ATK team will be turning its attention soon towards final preparations for the next Cygnus launch, which will be the return of the Antares rocket and a launch from Wallops, Virginia. A good view of the Cygnus resupply ship, loaded with some 7,700 pounds of supplies and experiments for the Expedition 47 crew on board the International Space Station, closing now to within about 14 meters, about to reach the capture point, at which time Tim Kopra will begin to maneuver the Canadarm 2 robotic arm with the assistance of crewmate Tim Peake to reach out and snare the grapple fixture on Cygnus and complete its 3-day rendezvous. And coming into view at its capture point, the Cygnus cargo craft, from this view, from the end effector on the Canadarm 2 robotic arm, you'll start to see the grapple fixture come into play.
Houston Station on Space Ground 2 for Cygnus at primary range of 15 meters. The only change to corridor monitoring is in the starboard one low outboard camera, and we now see the circle in the center of the corridor.
Good words, Tim. Houston copies.
And there is the grapple fixture, to which Tim Kopra will reach out and grab through the use of the robotic arm a short time from now. Our expected grapple time remains 5:47 a.m. Central Time, 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time. Cygnus now at its capture point and will remain passive at this point in a station-keeping mode to enable Tim Koper to begin robotic arm operations. Cygnus steady as a rock at its capture point. The station will go into free drift a short time from now, basically disabling any thruster firings for the duration of the time of the robotic operations to avoid any perturbations as Tim Koper extends the robot arm in for its grapple.
Station confirm capture point hold for step 8 in 1.102.
Station copies, step 8 in work.
And Flight Director Gary Horlocker is receiving a go from his flight controllers for capture, the final step on the road to securing Cygnus at the end of the robotic arm. All of Cygnus's systems in excellent shape as it sits very passively just a few feet away from the robotic arm itself.
Houston station on space ground 2 for Cygnus. Capture conditions are confirmed and the crew is ready for Cygnus capture.
Houston copies. Stand by for capture.
We expect robotic arm motion in about 30 seconds with all of the flight control positions both here and at Dulles, Virginia, having expressed approval to proceed on. All of the systems are in excellent shape on the Cygnus cargo craft as it awaits its capture under the control of Expedition 47 Commander Tim Koper, working from the cupola workstation.
Station, you are go for Cygnus capture sequence. Step 4 in 1.110 Cygnus capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Station copies, go for step 4.
The crew now will begin the procedures to maneuver the robotic arm towards the grapple fixture that you're looking at the aft end of the Cygnus cargo craft. Spacecraft communicator Jeremy Hansen is talking to the crew from here in Mission Control in Houston. Tim Koper operating the arm, Tim Peake serving as a backup and monitoring the alignment of the robotic arm to the grapple fixture itself. Flight engineer Jeff Williams of NASA monitoring Cygnus' systems. The robotics officer here at Mission Control reports that the trigger is hot on the snares at the end of the robotic arm. The SS Rick Husband rock steady in orbit just a few feet away from its capture. Cygnus now also in free drift, so we have a very stable configuration. The robotic arm poised to be moved in for grapple just moments from now. Cygnus and the International Space Station flying 252 statute miles over the Southern Ocean, south of the southern tip of South Africa. And the robotic arm now has been put in motion by Expedition 47 Commander Tim Copra. As a heads up, we're expecting to lose our downlink television capability from the station at about 51 minutes after the hour, so It will be very close to see if we actually have television at the time of grapple. We're hoping so. But the robotic arm now in motion by Tim Copra for its final approach to snag onto the grapple fixture at the aft end of the Cygnus cargo craft. Cygnus extremely stable, the arm within 3 meters. Cygnus now in free drift, its thrusters disabled to prevent any perturbations at the final instant before capture. Two meters away now.